All of the major news stories made simple and easy for your listening pleasure. We'll break it down for you in keywords. And for this segment, we're joined by Adam. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Lena.
Have you ever taken online classes?
I haven't, no.
Really? And that surprises me.
I think so. No, I don't think I have.
Or it's been a little too long since you last took an online course.
Any class,
Any class for them.
It's been a while.
You know, because there are so many available. I just tried to dabble in a few. And the problem is I'm a full-grown adult with a job. And so when things get a little too busy, I drop it. It's the first thing to be dropped from my list of to-do lists.
I've taught through virtual means.
And what was that
English.
Experience like?
Not as effective as in person, I must say.
Were you teaching adults or younger kids?
I was teaching adults over the phone and through Skype as well.
Yeah.
Not as effective.
To hold their attention?
Right, to hold their attention and my attention as well.
You should have done a little dance.
Yeah.
You're right.
Should have been creative.
You know, that's the thing. Is it fair to ask teachers to, come up with these new skills so they can keep the attention of their students? I mean, there are all these tricky things that we didn't have to account for before the pandemic.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, just because you change the medium in which you learn, you need to take a different approach to how you, you do it.
And we haven't even figured out whether or not it's effective for us to retain information for a longer period of time. Do we need these face-to-face interactions? We don't know.
Interesting.
Something to think about this morning, folks. And
Food
we
for
do
thought.
invite our listeners to give us your 2 cents. Let's jump into keyword news, shall we? As always, we're going to try to clarify some of these major headlines for you, starting with our first pick of the day.
Carbon reduction.
So President Moon Jae-in has given more updates on Korea's plan to cut down on carbon emissions leading up to that big climate change conference to take place in Scotland later this month. I understand it's kind of an ambitious blueprint to go green faster.
Yes, it is exactly that. It is to go green faster. And Moon Jae Korea will reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% from the country's peak in 2018. That's an upgrade of the country's 2030 nationally determined contributions, or otherwise known as NDC target, ahead of that global climate conference that you mentioned that's happening next month. He was speaking at the second session of the Presidential Committee on Carbon Neutrality, which actually drew up roadmaps for cutting greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030 and bringing them to net zero by 2050. That's the government's goal anyway. Now, these NDCs, they're pledges on climate action submitted by countries under that landmark 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Korea's earlier goal was a reduction of 26.3% from 2018. So it's almost double that goal President Moon is wanting to do. Now, Korea's carbon emissions hit a record high of 727.6 million tons in 2018, and the upgraded NDC seeks to reduce this amount to 436.6 million tons by 2030. And the Korean government will formally submit its new NDC target during that UN climate change conference, otherwise known as COP26. It's taking place in Glasgow at the end of this month, in fact.
Just double check. So it starts on a Sunday on October 31st.
Right.
So it does start at the end of this month, but rolls into, of course, the first few weeks of November.
Yeah, I think the first day will be kind of like the pleasantries, and then they'll get down
the
to
welcome
business.
dinner.
And then they'll get down to business from November.
On a Monday. The committee also unveiled 2 upgraded policy roadmaps for the country. Run us through the details.
Yeah, one scenario aims to eliminate all thermal power generation using fossil fuels and liquefied natural gas. The second roadmap also aims to abolish coal-fired power generation, but will keep LNG as a flexible power source, which will generate some emissions. So one plan is a very ambitious one, the other is more realistic. The scenarios include plans to utilize carbon capture, utilization and storage, known as CCUS capabilities, to achieve net zero goals. According to the roadmaps, the proportion of coal power generation in 2030 will decrease from the current 41.9% to 21.8%, while renewable energy will reach 30.2% from 6.2%. So very ambitious goals there.
Sure.
And the goal is, of course, to reduce emissions in the power generation sector by 44.4%. So that is a very large amount.
Just know that this is a blueprint, so it is kind of our northern light. But I mean, I do think we have to work at the details details like incentives, for example, like tax breaks or even subsidies for companies that prioritize green energy.
Yeah, so they're setting their targets high, but they do realize that some realistic measures do need to take place.
For the transition to be smooth. I mean, we're also talking about economic growth and how it affects the private industry and so on forth. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, it is.
All right, moving on to our second keyword of the day.
Soaring inflation.
Inflation continues to soar in Korea and the rest of the world, creating headaches for Koreans whose paychecks remain the same. What does this mean for restaurant owners? You're right. A big sigh, and the headlines, local headlines reflect exactly that. I mean, I saw egg prices jump 70% compared to last year around this time.
That is crazy. If you like omelets or, for British people, egg on toast is
to be honest with you, a lot
breakfasts.
of Korean cuisine requires eggs. I'm realizing for the first time.
It's surprising how much eggs are used in Korean cuisine, right?
So again, it's not just a headache for, I think, personal expenses. For, again, these small business owners have already, trying to make ends meet in the most difficult setting.
Yeah, exactly. But not only that, but there are people who are struggling from the pandemic as well. And so that's creating more people for them. And this rise in inflation is, of course, making it difficult for these people to buy even those daily necessities, such as groceries and eggs and bread and whatnot.
Rice.
And rice as well, yeah, exactly. But oil prices have actually seen the most notable jump, in fact. So if you're a car owner like you and I, then, of course, the price at the pumps have obviously gone up.
They should have gone hybrid.
Yes. Gas prices in Seoul, for example, they've topped 1,800 won per litre for the first time in 7 years. According to data compiled by the Korea National Oil Corporation, the average price of gasoline in Seoul rose 4.41 in a day to 1,801 won per litre. The national average also climbed to 1,724.7. That's 37 won higher than last week's average, so it is quite a jump. Crude oil prices have been rising recently across the board due to, of course, revived demand amid the global recovery from the pandemic. But supply has been short due to disruptions at some facilities and as oil-producing nations have been restraining increased output. The rising value of the dollar against the local currency is also raising import prices, while demand for fuel is only increasing as the winter approaches as well. So a host of a plethora of factors that are leading to this price rise.
Right.
But market watchers say that gas prices may actually climb further, so no possible signs of abating for the moment anyway. And there's a growing call for the government to lower fuel taxes to ease the burden on consumers. Now, the government did actually cut fuel taxes temporarily back in 2018 when gas prices soared to astronomical levels. It remains to be seen if the government will do the same this year. And of course, as we said, it's not just oil. Food prices are also rising. Dozens of food items climbing on average of over 6% in Q3 compared to the year before. Overall inflation in the country has been hovering above the BOK's target of 2% for 6 straight months. It's forecast to surpass 3% actually this month as well.
We're not getting a break.
Things are getting expensive, unfortunately.
All right, with not necessarily a solution in sight for the foreseeable future. So managing my expenses, all right.
I might use this opportunity to lose some weight.
Cut down on groceries. All right, we'll leave it there for now. On to our third keyword of the day.
Info sharing request.
So the government says it will closely cooperate with local chip makers to help them cope with growing pressure from the United States, particularly with its recent demand that they disclose sensitive information for these companies. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, quite a controversial issue. At an inaugural strategic meeting on the economy and security, the finance minister, Hong Nam-gi, said corporate autonomy regarding trade secrets, state support and cooperation with the US should be considered. And now the US Department of Commerce last month actually asked global chip makers to provide information on their inventories and other details by November 8th to, quote, help improve trust and transparency. This has prompted concerns about potential leaks of trade secrets crucial to the national economy. The US said the request was part of efforts to resolve the chip shortage. Hong said the government will continue to consult with the US over the matter, but he also stressed the need to consider how sensitive the information can be and ways the government can ease the burden on companies. Hong also said the country will soon make a decision on whether to join the CPTPP. That's the mega-size free trade agreement comprised of 11 Asia-Pacific countries. And the decision on that is likely to be made next week.
All right, on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Depopulation.
There have been growing concerns over populations decreasing, particularly in regions outside the capital area. The government has designated these regions as, quote, depopulation areas, unquote, out of fear that they could go extinct. So what's the latest?
It's quite a scary word, isn't it? Going extinct.
Right.
But it is could be a reality, actually, because
in certain regions where there are only the aged population, for example.
Right, exactly. Young people are going out of those regions.
Right, going to cities.
Right, and it's been a years-long kind of concern for the government, and the Interior Ministry therefore has designated nearly 90 small cities and counties that are in danger of extinction due to the population decrease, and they have named them, as you said, depopulation areas. This means they are subject to intensive support from the central government. Relevant public notice is actually to take effect from today. It is the first time for the nation to declare specific regions in danger of becoming extinct due to population decline, and Korea has been struggling with a steady decline in childbirths and the overcrowded capital region as well, which have left many non-capital regions struggling to overcome depopulation. These areas include 16 cities and counties, each from South Cholla and North Gyeongsang provinces. It also includes 12 from Gangwon province, 11 from South Gyeongsang, 10 from North Cholla, 9 from South Chungcheong, and 6 from North Chungcheong. In the capital region as well, 4 counties, Gapyeong, Yeoncheon, Gangwon, and Ongjin were included. They're not solved, they're kind of outside, but still. 3 wards in Busan and 2 wards in Daegu were also listed as well. The ministry said it will help the depopulation areas establish and implement customized policies to escape their population crisis. In addition, the government will pump 1 trillion won annually for a period of 10 years to these areas to help them create more jobs, entice and induce young people, and increase their living population.
So essentially make it more attractive so young people want to migrate there and maybe set up shop. All right, on to our fifth keyword of the day.
Colin Powell dies.
So tributes are pouring in for Colin Powell, the retired 4-star general who became America's first Black Secretary of State and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When he retired first in 2013, he was, I think, touted as one of the most powerful people in all of America.
Right.
He is said to have passed away due to complications from COVID-19. Tell us a little bit more about this story.
Right. Powell, who was actually fully vaccinated against COVID, had several underlying conditions. He had been suffering from Parkinson's disease and had been treated recently for multiple myeloma, according to a Powell family spokesman. Now, that illness is a type of blood cancer that hurts the body's ability to fight infections. So that seems to be the most likely reason why he died from complications from COVID-19. It's not official, though. Powell had also undergone surgery for prostate cancer when he was Secretary of State nearly 2 decades ago as well. Leaders and former colleagues have held him as a leader and a hero. Former President George W. Bush, whom Powell actually served as Secretary of State, praised him as a great public servant. The incumbent President Joe Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden said they were deeply saddened by the passing of a dear friend and a patriot of unmatched honor and dignity. Biden actually ordered flags to be lowered in Powell's honor through Friday as well. Just to give a brief background on who he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff between 1989 and 1993. In that role, he presided over military crises, including the invasion of Panama in 1989 and the first Gulf War in 1990. But it was the build-up to the contentious invasion of Iraq in 2003 that Powell became kind of a household name. He was the face of the Bush administration's aggressive attempt to get the international community to back the invasion. That, of course, was later found to be based on false claims of Iraq's possession of weapons of mass destruction, and Powell's backing of the war, which went ahead without UN authorization, had actually sparked some controversy. So that's how he made the headlines.
Exactly. And later on, he would actually clarify in his speech that he actually regretted the invasion itself.
Right. And he did say that at the time he was against it, but he was just basically following the president's order. And of course, he wasn't Secretary of State during Bush's second stint as well, during the re-election.
Right.
And he he actually identifies as a Republican, but he hasn't always toed the party line. He actually endorsed Democrats Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton during their presidential campaigns, and also most recently he endorsed Joe Biden in his run against the then President Donald Trump as well.
All right, it is difficult for us to, I guess, capture the legacy of Powell in just a short time, but that's the gist of it.
It is. Yeah.
And let's move on to our last keyword of the day.
Slowing China growth.
So turn to China for our last story today. The country's economic growth is under threat due to a number of factors, namely a power shortage. What's the latest?
Yes, a power shortage is among the main reasons why its growth is under threat. The country's third quarter GDP grew a disappointing 4.9% as industrial activity rose less than expected in September. Many analysts expected at least 5% growth. This was also far slower from the previous quarter, when the growth was actually almost 8%, suggesting that the recovery is weakening. Yes, you mentioned the power shortages, as well as outbreaks of COVID-19 and pressure from Beijing on a number of industries are taking their toll. Watchers believe these developments may dampen growth for the rest of the year as well. Meanwhile, industrial production growth slowed further to 3.1% on year in September. Power rationing in recent weeks, along with surging raw material costs and the government's climate push, has led to reduced mining and manufacturing activity. China's property sector, the ones that's making the headlines, is also facing increasing pressure to rein in its debt. The most notable example, the China Evergrande Group, owes more than $300 billion and finds itself on the brink of default. It's not the only company, though. Another property developer, Fantasia, defaulted. Sinek Holdings, another firm, has warned it is at risk of going down the same path as well.
And of course, how does this impact the global economic crisis? I think that is something we're all watching out for.
Certainly will impact it, yes.
Thank you very much, Arirang, for today's coverage. That was a lot of grounds to cover.
It was a lot, wasn't it? Yeah.
We'll do it again tomorrow, won't we?
We will.
I'll see you then.
See you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.